Throughout history, there have been few synthesizers that have left as much of a mark on music as the Prophet 5 from Dave Smith. Arguably one of the 3 greatest synthesizers ever designed, I'll leave you in the comments to debate what the other 2 are. The Prophet 5 was designed in 1977 by Dave Smith and John Bowen and was the first ever fully programmable polyphonic analog synthesizer. The result, pretty much every single band that could afford one and get one because they sold out immediately was using the Prophet 5. Fast forward to today, and I want to find out if the Prophet 5 and its modern recreation is still arguably one of, if not the greatest synthesizers ever made. Before we go any further, a lot of the sounds you're going to hear in this video are from my brand new Prophet 5, Prophet 10 custom patch bank. You can click the link in the description to go to my store and it will be there very shortly. Alright, with that out of the way, let's jump into a demo track where every synth sound is the Prophet 10. Now, before we go any further, it's important to note that the Prophet 5 and its modern faithful recreation, the Prophet 10, don't have any effects and they're a single mono out, meaning that if you play the synth by itself, it sounds spectacular, but it's not going to have any reverb or stereo width. I personally love that mono dry sound, and I actually think it's one of the strengths of the Prophet, which we'll get into later. But if you do want to have a stereo field, which we're very used to hearing with synthesizers or any kind of time-based effects, you're going to need some effects. So for the remainder of the video, if you do hear reverb or chorus, it's going to be one of these 2 pedals. Firstly, the Boss Wazacraft Dimension C. Seriously, there is something magical about how this analog chorus interacts with the Prophet, and pairing with it is the Nightverb from Erica Synths. Now, I'd love to say that I'm using the Nightverb because of how it sounds specifically, but in reality, I'm using it because of this big gain knob over here, because the Boss Wazacraft, unfortunately, does not take line level very well, but it sounds so good that I have to use it anyway. The Prophet has such a timeless sound, and it's so easy to get the sounds you want because of the workflow and the knob per function layout that I've been finding I've used it on pretty much every single track, no matter what the genre is, since I got it. A quick shameless plug, my brand new song, Fuck It, I'm Alright with Sabai, that is helping me go on tour, actually uses almost entirely the Prophet and the OB6 for all of the synth parts. Here's a clip of just the synth parts from that track. Now that we've done the modern stuff, let's jump into some classic Prophet tones. And I think for many of you, myself included, this just will sound like home. This just sounds right. Now before we jump onto the front panel, let's see where we're at. Is the Prophet 5/10 the greatest synthesizer ever? I think in terms of raw tone, at least from everything I've tried, if we're including the modern recreation, nothing else is quite like this. The OBX8, the OB6, the Moog Matriarch, all of these are amazing sounding synthesizers, but nothing, for me at least, quite has the ability to be both a chameleon and a character synth that the Prophet 10 has. If you aren't convinced by the modern demo track, the rock-focused track I made with Sabai, or these classic Prophet patches, then take a listen to this ambient jam where it's just a single mono Prophet patch going into some reverb. I told you, it's impossible to make this thing sound bad. Let's jump onto the front panel and I'll show you some of my favorite tips, but this won't be a comprehensive walkthrough as this synth has been around for double the length I've been alive. Let's go ahead and listen to our saw wave. We've got a square wave, lovely square wave, with pulse width. Lovely. And then we've got a ability to put both of them together. This waveform, absolutely usable. Let's throw some release up there. We can disable the release, and then now it works with my sustain pedal. Right, nice. This really unique combination of saw and square, I like it better on the Prophet 5/10 than any other synth that I've heard, and it's actually super usable. So if you have one or you have a VST, try to experiment with that. Okay, we've got oscillator 2 here. Let's turn off oscillator 1, and you'll notice it's not making any sound. That's because we have to enable an oscillator shape. Really funny that you can actually just turn it off. That's messed me up a couple times. This, we have the same 2 oscillators, but we have this beautiful triangle wave. Seriously, I don't know what it is, but the triangle wave on the Prophet 5 is magic. Throw it to some reverb. I'll just jam on this for a sec. So beautiful, right? Like you can just use this as a patch. It's great. And if we combine it with the other waves, sorry about that, gets really loud like I mentioned. One of the things I really like is on oscillator B, and I wish oscillator A had the triangle too, is just triangle and square. Because then you can do these like really thin pulse wave sounds, but you still get that nice fundamental, so without it. Really useful, right? Okay, let's go back to oscillator A for a sec. We can actually sync the oscillators, which is cool. So surprisingly, it's for a pretty early synth, sync is there. Somebody tell me if this is the first poly synth that had oscillator sync. I don't think it is, but tell me in the comments which the first one was. I would love to know. Okay, so let's sync it. And that's probably a good time to get to our polymod section, because this is where the magic of the Prophet is. So basically, the genius of Dave Smith was coming up with a way to do complex modulation akin to something you'd see on a mini Moog or some kind of other analog mono synth, but on a polyphonic synthesizer. So that's the polymod section here, where we can actually send either the filter envelope or the oscillator B to modulate different things like the frequency, pulse width, and filter. So the classic sync sound, for example, is using the filter envelope on frequency A. Changing our shape here. Let's bring down our oscillator B. Throw that into unison. Let's do that. Got a great unison mode here. Right, instant sync lead stuff. It's great, it's really fast. And similarly, more interestingly, this is where the magic of the polymod analog FM section comes in. So let's go ahead and we'll do something really obnoxious and obvious here. So if we take our oscillator A, and we take our oscillator B, and they're playing at the same pitch. Had to turn off sync there. Right, got our lovely detuned saw wave sound you probably expect. But then, as we bring in oscillator B on frequency A, listen to what happens. We're modulating oscillator A with oscillator B in this really beautiful organic way. Seriously, I don't know what it is, but this is the best sounding analog FM I've ever heard, bar none. Like, there's some mono synths that sound this good, but I've never heard a polysynth do it this well. So for example, now if I take off oscillator B, we can get some really complex sounds just modulating with a triangle wave, for example, the frequency or the filter. By the way, there's no vintage knob on this yet. We can go even crazier if we bring up the vintage knob, which will add per voice, filter, envelope, pitch, VCA, deviations. So full vintage. This might sound kind of broken. I said this about the Bri 6 from GS Music, but a sign of a really good analog synthesizer, in my opinion, is when you don't even need the vintage knob, and you don't need it on this. But then when you add a little bit of it, the magic happens. Let's go down an octave. One of my only major gripes, there's no octave transpose button. I wish they had just added a little couple of them here. I don't think it would have ruined the aesthetic, and it's just so annoying to have to use this global transpose all the time. Let's try the pulse width instead of the frequency. Let's do a square wave. Right, all these little hidden pockets of pulse width modulation, frequency modulation at audio rates, some of my favorite things about this synth. But that's not all, right? Because we can throw this into low frequency mode if we want. And let's go back to triangle. And now we've just got a really usable second polyphonic LFO. Throw that on the filter. Like, come on, absolutely beautiful. Let's try that with saw waves. We can make it not follow the keyboard, so everything is the same speed. Speed it up till it's almost audio rates. See what I mean? It's literally impossible to make this polymod section and these oscillators and this filter sound bad. Everything is perfectly curated. Throw it back into audio rate mode. As fast as it'll go. Like, listen to that, that's beautiful. It's almost like a downsampling level of like really fast fluttery audio rate modulation. And just like that, I'm actually gonna save this patch. Like, this is actually a really good patch. Let's go throw something in here. Probably nothing's here. Something so deceivingly simple as literally all we're doing is taking a single saw wave, putting it into a filter, which we haven't even gotten to yet, and then using super fast audio rate saw wave modulation at the highest pitch we can go, C9, and a bit of vintage knob. We haven't even gotten to our LFO, which is, it shows like for such a limited synth, you get a surprising amount of timbral variety. So the LFO, classic for just kind of your standard vibrato. I'll turn this off for a sec. Can go nice and fast. Already sounds good, right? Combine it with the polymod. Throw it to the filter. One of my only gripes about the shapes that are available for both the LFO and the oscillators is there's no reverse saw, which creates that sort of like plucked sound akin to this. Like this kind of sound. And there's no looping envelopes, so you can't do that kind of like cascading plucky sound. Just be aware of that, but otherwise, the shapes are great because at first you might be thinking, hey, where's random? Where's sample and hold? But this is the brilliance of the Prophet LFO section is it really, in my opinion, is almost like two LFOs in one because you can seamlessly crossfade between LFO modulation and white noise. Only white noise. Let's do this on oscillator B for a sec here. We're getting rid of our patch, but that's okay. We saved it. Probably take that off of no keyboard mode. Instant lo-fi. Again, look at that. This is literally just a single triangle wave, not even any filtering. This is by itself. By itself, sorry. Bring in the LFO noise mod. Verses. Vibrato. Sounds bad, right? But we mix and match between, so we're getting vibrato. Subtle vibrato for C6 sounds mixed with noise mod. Beautiful. If we want even more noise, we've got white noise here. I find you rarely need this, but it is good if you want to try to do percussion sounds or really dirty sounds like this. We're not even using oscillator A. Let's try that. That's a bit too much. Perfect time to go into the filter. We've got two filters. We're on the Prophet Rev 3 filter right now, which sounds beautiful, but it's not even the one I ever use. We've got our filter velocity and amp velocity up here if we want a more expressive sound. Okay, we gotta enable the reverb and the chorus a little bit for this one. So here's with the chorus on. Magical, right? I'm gonna do a little bit of a more subtle chorus. And then the reverb. Wow, okay. Let's not get carried away. We still have some synth to cover. Initialize the preset, and this will be much easier to tell because it is really interesting and it's worth making the distinction. Rev 3 filter, very brassy, very like classic low pass filter. It's great, it's classic, but it's not my absolute favorite. I think it's really good specifically for like brassy, plucky sounds like this. And then the Rev 1 and 2 filter. Rev 3, Rev 1. Let's go down an octave again. See, I told you this was annoying. Bring in the second oscillator. Let's do a different envelope shape here. I just love this Rev 1 and 2 filter. Exact same thing on Rev 3. You can kind of hear the difference better with chords like that, right? It's like this is very brassy and mid-range. This has this like sizzle and aggression that makes it just cut through a mix. Higher resonance for Rev 3. I also find this is more of an annoying resonant peak, but that's being really nitpicky because, you know, it's available there if you want it. It's awesome they included both, but most of the time I use Rev 1 and 2. Really cool feature, you can actually hold this down, resonance compensation. So there you go, now the bass doesn't drop out. Right, perfect for those synthwave sounds. If we do a little bit lower. I guess I'll just finish off by going over quickly the philosophy of how every single thing on this is designed specifically for a reason, right? So for example, we don't have any menus, right? If we want to change the pitch bend range, for example, we go and hold frequency A, and now it's pitch bending, or let's do a whole octave. For example, if we wanted to change the keyboard settings, if we're in like unison, which we haven't even looked at quite yet, we can go here, change the unison, last note re-trigger here. The amount of unison voices, right? Everything is, once you learn it, there is no thinking. Probably needs a bit more vintage. Right? Same with pretty much everything to do with like the aftertouch. We can do filter. Send the LFO for some vibrato. It really is holistically thought through so that you really, once you learn it and you understand the magic of this workflow and the fact that the entire thing is one giant sweet spot, it keeps as much of your brain power focused on what you're actually writing and creating and as little of it focused on like, oh, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I think that's why this synth is so iconic and so magical. The last feature I'll show you before we wrap this part up is going to be my favorite feature by far, which I don't think was available on the original Prophet 5 because you wouldn't have enough voices. And this is pretty much the best justification to get the Prophet 10 over the Prophet 5 that I can think of, and that is of course the beautiful poly-unison mode. What poly-unison does is it takes 5 voices and 5 voices and essentially doubles everything up. So now instead of 2 oscillators per voice, we've got 4, and the results are simply beautiful. If we play without poly-unison, it's great, right? How could it get better than that with poly-unison? hopefully you have a good idea from that why the Prophet is so iconic and why it's also more complex than meets the eye. So in terms of pros and cons, let's try to tackle the question from the beginning. Is the Prophet 5 / its recreation, the Prophet 10, the most iconic and greatest synthesizer of all time? I really think that depends on what you look for out of synths. With how much both vintage Prophets sell for as well as these recreations, it is laughably limited how few features this has. And again, the fact that it's a mono output synth with no effects in 2025 and I still bought it, that either says I'm crazy or there's something special going on here. But what I've realized after using the Prophet directly after synths like the Third Wave, the UDO Super Gemini, and VSTs I love like Serum, is that there is a absolute magic to the workflow of the Prophet 10 paired with how it sounds and how easy it is to get where you're going. If a synth like the Super Gemini or the Third Wave is a journey to a far off distant land where you're not really sure what's going to happen on the adventure and it's exciting for that reason, the Prophet is a journey to a comforting cottage on a lake where nothing is going to really surprise you, but it just feels right. There's something about the Prophet that every time I sit down with it, I write a song. Every time I sit down with it, I write an idea. Some of these jams that you're hearing are going to be songs in the future that I will release. If it sounds like I'm taking crazy pills, then I challenge you to make a jam using only the Prophet or whatever Prophet style VST you have and embrace its limitations, because I really do believe that with limitations comes some of the greatest creativity and greatest music you will ever compose, because you'll be focused on what's really important, which is the workflow and flow state of the synth. But that's it for me. Like I mentioned in the intro, my Prophet 10, Prophet 5 custom patch bank is going to be available in just a day or two. So stay tuned here. I'm going to pin the comment and add it to the description. And thank you so much in advance if you pick up the Prophet 10 patches or any of my other synth patches. It really helps me fund the channel and keep making these free synth videos for you all. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.